Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So we're taking a look into next week's price action and pretty much going to go through our previous analysis and give you an insight for what we've got up ahead for next week. So we are going to start off with gold. So what we was looking at from last week, pretty much we was looking out for a potential move lower into the 1760 level, but it ended up obviously reversing, pushing higher. Now we're coming into that 1870 level, and it's pretty much that kind of level where we're thinking, okay, is something gonna potentially break higher, or are we gonna possibly break lower? So as I was looking for price to possibly push lower here, we didn't necessarily get that. So my thoughts on this pair is possibly that we could start to reach up to the upside as one scenario. So I'm going to add in, well, talk about this 1880 level right now. So if we do get price to push up from here, like we said from last week, is we're going to be waiting for a retest. So I wouldn't be expecting price to be as small as just for example, if price does break above here, we just get a little tap and then go. It'll be pretty much a more deeper one that I would expect. So maybe you could possibly look at taking some sells into this, or maybe you can just wait it out for the buys. I mean, it's up to you really. But the second scenario that I'm going to be looking into is still this possibility that if we don't break above 1880, there's still a possibility that we could break lower to the downside. And obviously for whatever reason, we'll have to watch 1750 and see if we get a rejection or if we'll get that continuation play lower. So I probably will keep these three annotations in and three scenarios in mind, but that's what I'm pretty much looking into for gold for next week. So let's take a look into EURUSD. So for this, we pretty much was looking at 115. This was like a level where I was like having some sort of importance here. So what essentially I'm trying to see from this is to see if we're going to break above, or are we going to possibly break lower. So let me just pull up some of my notes that I've got. So essentially what I'm thinking from this, from last week's play, is just how prices just pushed up, but pretty much just consolidated, moved sideways. What I'm thinking with this is to see if price can potentially continue its way up to breaking 115 with with more commitment. So I would say this is what we're looking at is the first scenario from last week. So if I go ahead and just move this lower, we could pretty much involve this. So I think what I'll be looking in for next week for EU is pretty much just buys into that 115 and hoping that eventually we'll get there, and then probably in the week after, or depending if we get there early on in this week, we could be looking at how price reacts to the upside. So I probably will get rid of the third scenario that we spoke about last week, but essentially I'm expecting price to again reverse to the downside. So again, it's going to be the matter of when this reverses. So I wouldn't be keen on taking sells aggressively first. We might as well ride that momentum towards the upside and see any signs of failure candles, etc., or changes of momentum to the downside, and that would obviously indicate that we're selling. So my thoughts for this is pretty much just to see how price moves within this area, but we're ultimately aiming for price to reach above 1.15, and I'm pretty much going to be bullish on this until unless we break this low. So that's at 1.11. Ultimately, we can obviously look at some sells, but just be mindful that these are pretty much counter trend moves, so just be aware of that. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm suggesting for EU next week. Take a look at NZDUSD. So pretty much looking out for this 0.67 level. As we can see, we've pretty much reached that upper band, or this zone that we've broken above. So essentially we're waiting for pretty much a retest on this now. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this the downside move, and I'm thinking we're going to be looking at more of an upside move. So what we could anticipate is price to break to do something like this. And I'm going to be using 0.65 as a barrier. So if we, as long as we stay above this, I'll be looking for more bullish moves. You know, we can use this trend line if we just extend it ever so slightly. So we can use this as like a warning sign of potential resistance. But ultimately, I'm looking for this to play out with NZDUSD, and it's pretty much having a similar kind of process with EU as well. So if we take a look at AU as well, AUDUSD, so it's pretty much, I've got the same sort of expectations as NZD and NZDUSD and EU. So yeah, what we spoke about is if we break above 0.715, we should be able to potentially wait for that retest and then circulate ourselves back up. So you know, I'm quite happy with looking for bullish intentions this week. So ideally, you know, we want price to probably maybe look for a dip lower, and then hopefully, you know, if that dip is nice and, you know, not exactly too you know, too quick to move, if that makes sense, then hopefully we can get involved with this and see price push into at least the upper end of 0.73. So I'm just using this as like a form of resistance. But yeah, these are the kind of two barriers that, well, two ranges that I'm looking at. So as long as we stay above 0.7, I'm looking for price to be, well, I will still remain bullish. But if we break lower, I'll be looking for sales. So again, you can still take swings to the downside. Again, you just have to be mindful that you know, if you can squeeze some profits from this, obviously in the downside, just be mindful that there could be some huge reversals to the upside. So, well, not huge, but you know, just a bit more of a mover in that sense, in that direction. So yeah, so moving on to UJ. So yeah, so looking from this perspective, this week, you know, we were looking for, well, we were waiting for price to give us some sort of pullback, or we would see price just, you know, completely rocket above. So we were aiming for towards 117, and you know, we're seeing if we can reach into that level. So yeah, I'm thinking more or less this scenario is playing out because we didn't really break above this high here, or 116.5, so we didn't really break anything. We've just kind of rejected 116, so like a double top. So if we start to break lower and lower, this is where the intention for some sell-off opportunities can arise, so 113. But obviously you can start to, you know, potentially take those counter trend trades, and in the hopes that, you know, if it does break these levels, you know, 114, you know, breaking this resistance, sorry, support, you know, it could break all the way down. But my thoughts with this is pretty much, for now, what we're seeing is, you know, we want to see if price can tap up to the upside. So if we do get into this 117 or 116 range, we don't have to necessarily reach the 117. You know, we could. Again, it really depends what price action is, because this is probably one of the difficult parts about weekly analysis, is just reviewing data on a week-to-week basis, because a lot of things can change. But if we do a break above this high and we get like some sort of strong wick to the downside, it could indicate this massive reversal in which we could be heading into 113. But it's just something that I'm, you know, just keeping in the back of my mind just in case, because yeah, 116, we've got some nice resistance here. So I'm sure if we go back in detail or time, there's multiple levels of resistance / support on that. So I think that's something just to be aware and mindful of. But yeah, I would be looking for this for the start of the week, and then maybe if, you know, next week or maybe this week, if it's fast enough, we could be looking at to end with that. So that's kind of my kind of trajectory for UJ. So taking a look at CADJPY, so this had obviously dropped off very rapidly. So for this pair, I'm looking for actual continuations lower, which we spoke about last week, but it's been mildly confusing with you know, with all the what's called the choppy price action. But it pretty much stepped up and I'm liking how price is just dropping off very slowly now, so rapidly, just in that 4-hour candle. So what I'm going to be trying to do is just to wait for some sort of pullback, and then hopefully we can start to hedge ourselves into 89.5. I don't really want to go too far in terms of targets, but I would be just as a first target for this week, we could say 89.5, and then maybe optimistically 88. Again, it really depends what's going to be unfolding. And again, like I said before, it's quite hard to predict with that much future confidence, but we have to wait for price to kind of give us more data, and then we can analyze further. But on the other side, 92, if we get that break above there, and if we start to see that price action break higher, we'll be waiting for a retest and potential bullish pressure price action, and that's where we'd look for bullish positions. But yeah, I'm quite happy with CADJPY, so we are seeing that turnover now, so that's pretty good news. So let's move on to now EJ. So EJ, yeah, again, we was looking or anticipating that drop off in price. I've got the two scenarios from last week still, and I'm quite happy with how they've turned out. But basically, we were expecting a turnover to the downside. Price chopped up very nicely and completely broke lower. So my thoughts for this week is, are we going to be able to continue this momentum lower, or so this scenario, are we going to continue this momentum lower and break into 127? Or are we going to potentially find some sort of mid reversal, maybe at 129.5 or 129, and then we end up pushing a lot higher? So I'm going to mark out, I think we've got a zone here. Well, I'll probably mark out 133. I think that's a healthy line to look at. So yeah, so we could use these two levels, so at the start of the week, you could be just looking for sells, and then just be mindful that it could break lower. But I would also be expecting, and it wouldn't surprise me if we were to break up to the upside and have a reversal through the week to fulfill this, and then maybe drop off a lot, maybe the next week or so. But again, like I said, we need to see a bit more data and price action first before we see anything clearly. But yeah, so that's my kind of thoughts for EJ for this week. So let's move on to now AJ. So let's take a look here. So we can see we've broken out of our channel. Again, I'm expecting, or was expecting, price to just drop a little deeper, but we ended up reversing, completely breaking out. So now that that's completely pretty much ended up reversing to the upside, which is where this second part of the arrow was meant to go. We can start to now just shift this up now. So possibly what we could be looking at is just a retest. I wouldn't necessarily expect price to go that high, but we could be looking at 85. I think that would be a fair estimate for where price could go to. But ideally, I'm just looking at this scenario with a bit more detail now, because in the analysis from last week, we were ultimately expecting price to make that turnover to the to the upside. Now that price has done that a bit earlier than we expected, we can just wait for a retest now. So I'm not really worried about that, and hopefully we can now look into, expect price to go into possibly 85. But again, we'll just have to see how price reacts. 84.5, even 84. Actually, I might move it to 84, to be honest, just for safety. And obviously you guys can just be locking your profits or whatever you kind of do with your management plan. But yeah, so I'm quite happy with this. And again, if we break 79 or lower, we are looking at some sell-off opportunities. So yeah, let's take a look into USDCHF. So for this week for USDCHF, then I'm pretty much looking for some sort of sell-off in price action towards the downside. Yeah, as we can see, prices pretty much just been chopping all this week. So if you manage to get some pips from this, then it's quite a tricky one to get into that. But fair play if you did. So yeah, so my kind of perspective on this is just to see if we're going to break lower, or the second scenario is from, again, moving on from last week's analysis, is if we're going to break to the upside. So ultimately we do want to see price run into 0.94, or basically 0.935, and that's pretty much where we're heading. So this is why I've got these two scenarios, that we could possibly break lower and then rally higher, or we're going to be, just easily just going to be pushing and pushing and pushing, and then maybe through, I might write this in actually, and then maybe towards the end of the week we're going to expect some sort of price action like so. And again, it really depends how far we go. So maybe it might be something like this, maybe just pushing a little higher and then reversing lower. But this leg here, I think we can just start to discuss that in maybe next week or so. So yeah. So finally, if we do manage to, for whatever reason, just see a massive drop to the downside, if we break above below 0.91, again, this is going to be possibly price turning over to the downside, and yeah, it's going to be we're going to be looking for some sell-off opportunities in relation to breaking this zone here. So finally, moving on to USDCAD. So if we take a look here, so pretty much what we was expecting from last week was, just the possible downside move. We were expecting price to make some sort of pullback within this push up to the upside. So there is a possibility that we could still expect price to push lower. But my second scenario that I'm going to be mindful of is that price could just break towards the upside. And I'm looking at around 1.28. And again, if we break above here, this is pretty much the target that I'm looking at. And then, like I said, I believe last week, is we're going to be waiting for how price reacts in this area, because the possibility is that we could expect a reversal to the downside. So that's something that I'm just keeping in the cards and just being mindful of in the up and coming weeks. But also, similarly, we can obviously expect this possible scenario to unfold through the week. So this wouldn't surprise me if it does. But equally, if we do get price to rally up straight away in the week, again, that doesn't surprise me either. So again, this is why I like drawing up all these scenarios, just so that we, are pretty much ahead of the market in terms of what to expect, and then we can just plan around it on a day-by-day basis. So that's pretty much what I've got for this week. I don't think there's anything majorly important that I wanted to mention, but again, yeah, we'll come back next week and hopefully we can review the markets. And yeah, so hopefully you guys got some value from this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you all in our next week's video.